Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma and Brian E. Roach.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and joining me today, my good colleague, pal, as always, one, Mr. Brian E. Roach. Brian, what's going on, my friend?
Nothing.
Nothing. Well, you know, we were going to go a different path. We were going to go a different path with this particular show today, but we had an Rooney II press conference that is riling some of you up. So we're going to discuss some of the things that were mentioned, little sound bites that are being pulled from Rooney's presser, his little sit down with Rob King in the Steelers studios. You can find this on Steelers.com. It's about a 7 or 8 minute long clip if you choose to do so. So, well, without further ado, though, we have some other breaking news in the Steelers sphere, and it kind of, we were having some technical difficulties trying to get on here, Brian. You're in like sepia. You look like you're in the old Wild West here for those Ians watching on YouTube or the next day on Spotify. So Brian had to replace a web camera here, but we've got him. He's here. And during that time, Brian, I imagine you didn't hear this, so I'm going to get your raw reaction. We have some Pro Bowl alternates. I can't even say it. Pro Bowl alternates.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Samalau, Lualau, that guy.
No. Russell Wilson's now in the Pro Bowl too. So you've got who bowed out? It's going to be Joe Burrow, Russell Wilson, and Drake May from the New England Patriots. He replaces Josh Allen.
Just call it a game. Just like, this is just games. This is the fun and games. Because I'm sorry, Drake May is not a Pro Bowl caliber player.
But Mac Jones
quite frankly,
was.
Last year, neither was Russell Wilson, and no, neither was Mac Jones. and the backup quarterback for the Ravens the one year
I know.
was also not.
I was going to mention him. Trevor Siemian, also with the Broncos the one year. I will say it tongue-in-cheek, but now I could throw it in everyone's faces because we're going to talk about quarterback. You got to bring the Pro Bowler back. Why not? He made the Pro Bowl. He made that's the reason everybody wanted Mitch Trubisky a few years ago. He was in the Pro Bowl.
From now on, I'm calling it the guys who we can get to play bowl.
That's so true. Can they even get them? Because, you know, I was thinking about going down to bye week at the beach, right? I'll give them a little shout out here real quick. The public events, folks, if you're in Florida, you're a Steelers fan, you can make it down to St. Pete Beach this weekend. Check out byeweekatthebeach.com. You can also stay there at the Trade Winds Resort using a promo code BYWEEK, all in caps. That's BYEWEEK. And there's plenty of perks there. You could save off of some of the rates, valid for stays between, well, actually starting on the 29th here through February 5th. And there's swag bags, there's discounts on breakfast, there's a Q&A session. You can meet Rob King's supposed to be down there. You're going to have Ernie Mills and Darren Perry. So speaking of getting down to Florida, it's like, Russ, hop on a plane real quick. Let's see if you can participate in these Pro Bowl games, right? I was thinking about maybe doing the same thing, Brian, but alas, like everything seems to be scheduled for this weekend, and I just got so much stuff going on. But if you don't, and you want to make it down there, byeweekatthebeach.com, code BYWEEK. So we wish much success to them and thank them for presenting this episode of the Steel City Underground podcast, where we now have 2 extra Pro Bowlers joining. Now, TJ Watt won't be playing in the Pro Bowl game due to injury, but he joins, let's see, Sam Barlow and Russell Wilson join Chris Boswell, Micah Fitzpatrick, Cam Hayward, let's see, TJ Watt, who's out. And then Miles Killebrew was also an injury alternate. And Steelers Director of Player Development, Daryl Young, is part of the AFC staff. Whatever his capacity means for that. So
enjoy, flag football and throwing balls at circles or whatever the hell the skills challenges are. I won't be watching. I won't be attending.
I've had a curiosity to go, and I just don't know. It seems like it's such a poorly edited product for the skills when you see it on like ESPN. There was like it just seems like it's so choppy, right? And it moves through. And I don't mind them cutting out some of the dead space and it being like on a time delay, pre-recorded, whatever be the case, right? But then something just seems off with that entire thing. And then you get like, I'll admit it's better than what we got with the watered down Pro Bowl where they don't touch anybody, but not by much, not by much.
But is it?
Well, the next thing they're going to end up doing, they're going to do
that was like football, sort of.
I mean, what was that? Was that Sean Taylor back in the day that knocked somebody out of their shoes? But it's not like that anymore. Not like that anymore. You got too many guys making millions of dollars that don't want to get hurt participating in this stuff. I understand. I don't want to belabor the Pro Bowl. We got Art Rooney II said words and things and stuff. None of it really clear about anything, but there's things you could pick out of it. One of them has to do with Russell Wilson, right? And I've been yammering here. If you're on YouTube on the shorts, Facebook on the reels, Instagram reels, wherever, you get your little TikTok, follow us at all these places, subscribe. The little icons are right here down at the bottom of the screen. And I've been just yammering on about Justin Fields. And it's the same stuff I said last year. I haven't changed my position. I feel maybe a little better, but I'm not that great about it. I feel like, okay, Justin Fields is not the guy that I want to be the starting quarterback. I was cool with that being the backup quarterback, but the Steelers have no quarterbacks under contract. And some people have viewed this a little, I'd say skewed, not just from the way that the season the ebbs and flows, but starting right out the gate in contracts and why these guys are free agents. Number one, Justin Fields was on a rookie contract. He had 1 year remaining. Steelers did not. They declined fifth-year option, being an original first-round pick of the Bears. Would have paid him what, like $23 million, if I remember correctly, 25, somewhere in that neighborhood.
It would have been a nice ka-ching for Justin Fields.
Nice ka-ching for Justin Fields, who no doubt has an agent in his ear telling him he could get some ka-ching. We don't know how many of those jobs are out there. I don't even know if that job's with the Steelers for that kind of ka-ching, right? Now, Russell Wilson, he signs for 1 year, because if he signs for anything more than that, it impacts his $38 to almost $39 million he receives from the Denver Broncos. So he signs market basement $1 million for 1 year. I read all of these things everywhere. You got Art Rooney. First of all, let's say what he said. And I agree with this. He would like to bring both guys back. Both players have expressed desires to want to return to the Steelers for 2025. There's a lot of people who would desire to not have them. To those folks, I ask, who? We'll get back to that. Who else? You've got Art Rooney basically said we're going to pick, and we probably would like to have both guys back. Probably more realistic that we only get one. So that's going to split everybody. It's going to be more of a controversy now. I have to remind everyone that the way the offseason played out, Russell Wilson, they said pole position. He was hurt. He didn't participate in camp. Whether that was a bunch of baloney or not, we'll never know. That could have just been to give more of an audition to Justin Fields. We'll never know, including the first 6 games of the season. Russ comes in, he lights everything on fire, then everything burns to the ground. After like 6-7 games, then it burns all to the ground, and you're wondering, gee, I don't know. But Rooney says they have to get this fixed. Absolutely, they do have to get it fixed, and I do agree with them that you want at least one of those two back, because you don't want to start all over with a new quarterback. You usually, as Rob King mentioned with Arthur Smith being offensive coordinators see a little bit of a leap, or maybe a bigger leap, in year 2 just because of the continuity.
I think, so here's the thing. Art said we have to fix the quarterback position this year or sometime at least by next year. What that tells you is the draft is a viable conduit either in 2025 or 2026. Okay, that's all it says. It's a option. They're not going to draft top quarterback in 2025. If anything, they're going to draft somebody in the later rounds. If they do that, right? If I will state this unequivocally. No matter which one of those two guys you bring back, you are not going to win a championship with either one of them right now. You're just not. I don't believe it. I don't believe, Justin. I don't know that Justin Fields has what it takes to be the dynamic quarterback at this level that wins championships. And Russ will be 1 year older. And the warts that are there will be a little wartier with some more big dark hairs growing out of them. So I buckle up, settle in. I agree that continuity is going to be important because you probably aren't 100% fixing the problem this offseason. And so having somebody there to get you through until maybe 2026 and see where you're drafting then, see what falls to you this year, who knows? But I agree with the statement that only one of them likely is to come back, because I do think both of them think they can start in the NFL. I think both of them would have an opportunity in a quarterback-starved league to start somewhere else, and you're not going to be able to pay enough to keep them both.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I agree with Rooney on that too, because I don't think you're going to sink. Let's just say Justin wants 15 million. Russ, we said maybe 35 is probably as low as it'll go there. You're going to put $50 million into your quarterback room, and you're not going to do that in just 1 year. That'll absorb everything that you've got left, at least estimated for your salary cap right now. So then they have to impact that with void years and that. And neither of these guys are going to sign just a 1 year deal at this point, I don't believe.
Right. No shot.
And there's not a lot of opportunities out there, but you look around, there could be some. There's a lot of, smoke signals going up now that, oh, well, Pete Carroll and Russell Wilson are, now they're chummy again because Pete Carroll's going to the Raiders and they need a quarterback. But what happens when that happens and then they go and they draft somebody just like the Falcons did with Cousins and Michael Penix? Now, I don't think that the Raiders are going to, well, I can't say that because that Mike Davis is just a fool as far as an owner. You know what I mean? At least we're listening to Art Rooney and his state of whatever. And it seems I listen to some of these guys. Woody Johnson's sitting there, for example, talking about hiring Aaron Glenn. And he's like, oh, I would have taken this same path. This is such an intriguing path. It is for Aaron Glenn to go from player to coach to assistant positions, assistant defensive coordinator, now head coach. But he said this same stuff about every single guy, every single couple years. Adam Gase was like his big, catch, and Robert Salah. And it's like, come on, guy. So I don't buy all that. I don't necessarily know that I buy Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll patching up. I think that's a little bit of agent speak, throwing that out there to drive up a little bit of Russell Wilson market asking price. I will say, though, a lot of people have given me flack about what I've said with Fields. If you have Fields, we know who Fields is. I said Fields is very similar to Trubisky, very similar to Kenny Pickett. No, he's not. No, he's not. Well, Trubisky had 4 rushing touchdowns too as a Steelers quarterback, and Fields had 5. I throw the rushing stats out because in 44 starts, Fields has 15 rushing touchdowns, sometimes designed plays. But he's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Josh Allen. He's not Jalen Hurts. He's not any of these other guys. He's only had 5 of those games of 44 with 100 yards rushing or more. And 2 of those 500-yard games, no rushing touchdown. Not the same breed of player, all right? He's been sacked 3 or more times in 30 of 44 starts. In 18 of those 30, he's been sacked 4 or more times. 18 of 44. 30 overall, 3 or more. 3 is enough in a game to have a negative impact. When you take 8, like CJ Stroud did, you see what ends up happening. Kansas City well on their way. And by the way, Kansas City and the Eagles, like we were saying right here, both of these quarterbacks, tough sledding. We already saw what that looked like this year. Probably it looked the same playing against those same teams next year. But with Fields, only 2 games in his career, 44 starts, 2 games with 300 or more passing yards, 3 games where he's actually had 3 or more touchdown passes. The passing aspect of it isn't there for being as mobile as he is. The turnovers, 23 games with at least 1 interception, over half. Don't have to pull up the math graphic here. The turnovers, the negative plays. I mean, being mobile is one thing, but holding on to the football and making some more key mistakes, is it like the mobility isn't being properly used? Now, Rooney said this. He said that he would like to have 2 quarterbacks that share the same aspects, and these 2 were not. They're like a yin and a yang, and that didn't do the Steelers any favors either. So that's the reason why it's got to be one or the other. I don't know that I agree with some people, though, when they say that maybe Arthur Smith and his play calling or his style tilted or leaned or worked better, or he preferred Justin Fields. I'm just not buying that part of it, though.
look, who knows? I don't know. Everybody's speculating about it.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't buy it. It just I think you build the offense for Russell Wilson. I think he was supposed to be the starter. That's who you had penciled in from day one.
Supposed to be the starter, and I think you built the offense for Russell Wilson. Doesn't mean that the offense that they built was actually built for Russell Wilson, right? It just means that's what they should have done. But Arthur Smith could have clearly come in here with the idea of, this is my offense, this is how I'd like it to play. Yeah, it works better. Maybe it was designed in such a way that Justin Fields fits better than Russ does, and you should make adjustments as time goes on. Here's what it boils down to, right? Here's the pluses for Justin Wilson. He's younger by a lot, right? He is a more mobile guy. That's it, right? Russ, more experienced, probably a better passer overall, not as mobile. I question both of their decision making, especially over Russ's over the last 5 games, but both of them also suffer from the same problem in that the offensive line wasn't protecting anybody worth a crap. They were under pressure, under duress. Russ didn't escape very well. Maybe Justin escapes a little better, but he's trying to be a quarterback, which means he's trying to keep his eyes downfield, trying to do that thing that all the quarterbacks on TV say, oh, look at him. He's never just looking to run. Maybe he should just look to run sometimes. But the other thing that is probably here, you got one guy who might cost you 35+ mil, might cost you more. You got another guy who isn't going to cost you that much. I don't know where they're going to lean. I don't know that I think either one of them gives them a heads up, a huge gap in an ability to win next year. So that's why part of it to me is, I don't think you don't have your long-term solution in either one of them.
Oh, no, absolutely not. No long-term solution, but you're going to have to sign these guys to a 2 or 3 year deal, I think. Either one of them.
Yeah.
That's the only way you're going to secure them.
And are you going to invest $70 to $100 million in Russell Wilson?
I mean, that's tough.
To 30 to 45 million potentially in Justin Fields. It's a legitimate question, right? You want a guy to carry you through the next 3 or 4 years. You hope you can continue to improve. Maybe you find a guy that in year 2 is able to take the mantle, right? In the draft somehow. That they're not going to find a quarterback outside of the draft. They're just not right now. That's probably the way it goes.
We've done this exercise so many times when everybody wanted to replace Ben Roethlisberger. I want to swing to that and then come back around to, quarterbacks, not necessarily who's in the draft, but just overall, quarterbacks fail coming out of the draft.
Yeah.
It's the hardest position. It's also the most important position. That's why everybody's gunning for one. And we see lots of failure. We're like yucking it up right now about Drake May, with the Patriots. We don't know what his future holds. Mac Jones was a Pro Bowler. And we've seen them all. We can name all of them. The Marcus Mariotas. You see where Jameis Winston is. They bounce around from team to team. Somebody's going to come to me and be like, Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's throwing to, let's see, he has Christian Darrisaw as one of his tackles. He's throwing to Justin Jefferson, who might be the best, maybe with Jamar Chase, 1A and B, out of the best wide receivers in the league, with Jordan Addison there. And Aaron Jones is a running back and an offensive-minded head coach, and he only gets to play because JJ McCarthy, who was drafted there, got injured. Baker Mayfield had to bounce around, but Baker Mayfield was breaking the rookie record. I always had Baker Mayfield with a pretty high floor as far as coming into the league. Darnold, I wasn't so sure about coming out of USC. Josh Allen, nobody knew about. They were just like, oh, what about this guy? Well, the team that got Josh Rosen wrong. And I don't want to go through all these names again, but when you start getting into the middle rounds, you have very few exceptions of guys who succeed. It's usually somebody like Russell Wilson, and you're like, oh, well, Derek Carr is like a former second round pick. You do have Jalen Hurts, who was found in the second round, but I believe still was a top 50 pick. And I want to
let's stop there for a second.
Yes.
Is Jalen Hurts on a team that's dependent on Jalen Hurts?
No.
So there you go. That's a second round quarterback. Serviceable, good. Is he elite? I don't think so. Sorry, Eagles fans. I don't think Jalen Hurts is an elite quarterback. I think he's a good fit for the system that you guys are running, especially when you got Saquon Barkley breaking off 60-yard runs left and right.
You know what? I'm glad you brought this up because it's exactly where I was going to go. I have a lot of Yinzers in the feed. They were talking about, taking Terrell Edmonds over Lamar Jackson, and then Chase Claypool instead of Jalen Hurts. All right, let's talk about this like real quick too, because you've got Hurts, the tush push. He's scored 29. Actually, you could go back to, he's had double-digit rushing touchdowns in 4 of the 5 years. You go back, excluding his rookie season, right? And he's ran for like 700, 600, 600. Again, different breed of quarterback, but he's only taken 38 sacks, 36 sacks, another 38 this season. The difference now is last year, they counted on him. The previous 2 seasons, he had in 2021, 432 attempts and then 460 attempts. He threw for like 3,000-ish yards, 3,000-ish yards. Then he went and threw 538 attempts and only had about 150 yards more per, like, overall. And when you go there and see that he threw 23 touchdowns to 15 interceptions, 23 touchdowns to 15 interceptions. That's why they went out and got Saquon Barkley. It's never as though the Eagles have actually had a poor offensive line. They seem to be an offensive line factory there. And Hurts has had the same, just one of 2 centers over this whole time. Juergens, I think, was a Pro Bowler again, or was going to be. And then before him, the other Kelsey brother, right? But you go from 538 attempts. He only throws the ball 361 this year. 361.
That's the point.
And for 2,903 yards, 18 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. They're not relying on him. And he has A.J. Brown, and he has Devontae Smith, and he has Dallas Goedert, and he has an all-pro offensive line.
Don't get me wrong. I like, because somebody's going to snap up in the comments, oh, Jalen Hurts is not elite. You guys are nuts. What are you crazy? He's very good. He's not elite. All right? And you can tell that by what you just said. The year that they put it on his shoulders, they failed. Right? They succeed when Jalen Hurts is complimented because, there are multiple things that they have to stop. Then it's not all on him, right? They didn't have a running back or a running game last year. They went back out and they got an even better running back and a running game this year. All of a sudden they're in the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
And all the things you said, their offensive line is better. Their receiving room is way better. Their tight end room is better, right? Their defensive line
every single thing that they've got, their secondary is probably better too. Like that's right? A complete team. Yep.
But was Jalen Hurts going to be the answer to put us over the top? No. Sorry, he wasn't.
No, and he probably never gets on the field over Ben Roethlisberger, nor does Lamar Jackson. I mean, you count that 2019 year where Rudolph ends up playing, maybe Lamar gets in there. What's he do with Randy Fichtner? Then he probably find a seat back on the bench, young man. Well, we let Ben, future Hall of Famer, ride out his career. But Steelers quarterbacks combined attempted more passes. Now, I know Hurts missed 2 games, so it's a little skewed. But if you take the average of him throwing maybe 25 or 30 passes, it still works out. The math still checks out. He still threw for more yards and you had 21 touchdowns by Steelers quarterbacks to Hurts's 18 and just 1 more interception among the Steelers quarterbacks. I mean, you combine them together. What's that tell you? The rest of the team around them has to be better. So running it back with them probably isn't the worst idea. I do prefer Russell Wilson because they were scoring 10 more points per game. They were having 100 yards more per offense those first 7 games where he goes 6-1. It goes all in the toilet. He loses George Pickens. I think that's a viable excuse. We have Rooney talking about fixing the wide receiver room or adding some talent. Some people are like, oh, I was told that it's the worst kept secret that it was not the best room anywhere. One of the worst maybe in the league. And then you have Pickens maybe acting like a bonehead, and you've really got to figure out, can you even afford to move him or replace him? And that's a topic for another show. But you got to put the talent around these quarterbacks. If you don't secure at least one of these 2 quarterbacks, then what really is your option? You're not going to move up from 21 in the draft, I think, 22 in the draft. You're not going to be in arm's length. Yeah. You're going to be lucky to get another Kenny Pickett at that point, and you're just going to be getting the same.
And how did that turn out?
and it didn't, and that's what I'm saying about Fields too. I mean, Fields gives you a little bit more rushing, but the passing is like right there with Pickett. So you got to eke out these games with defense, and the defense disappeared in the latter half of the season with Russell Wilson as the starter. But everyone's placing that on Wilson because he had an interception here. He had the one fumble against the Ravens. The offense didn't do diddly squat. They didn't protect them. You had other defenses starting to play zone and figured out that the receivers just they didn't do anything. They didn't move. Yeah,
they don't come back to him when he's running. They sit there and go, "Well, I ran my route. What am I supposed to do?"
So
now?
I mean that holds true to also just Fields. I'm not just making this excuse for Wilson, but I don't envision Fields doing any better there, and I don't even know that he wins some of those other games, like the shootout against the Bengals, for example. Maybe he does some of it with his feet, but he's not going to beat the Chiefs. He's not going to beat the Eagles. He's not going to beat the Ravens on the road. I kind of doubt it. He had the opportunity to make that play of the game against the Browns in the snow. They put it in his hands. It didn't work. They gave him all the confidence. A lot of people will say, well, they had him handcuffed at the beginning of the season. Well, what we were saying and what we're assuming, a playbook is designed and they expect Russell Wilson to be the starter, then yeah, you kind of have a shell of an offense to start. But then as you get through, you've already installed things. You find out if you're a good coordinator, what bets fits these players, and you work with that.
So let's talk a little bit about handcuffed, right? Justin Fields was handcuffed. They didn't let him go deep. They didn't let him go long. There is a difference, and this is it. Like, here's what Justin Fields can do. It's not that he has a bad arm, right? But the way he throws the ball is more on a line, right? Russ can throw the ball on an arc, and the way he arcs that ball, the moon ball, is good for the fact that our receivers are never completely wide open, right? They're always somewhat covered. The catches are generally contested. Very rarely is it like, wow, there's nobody near him, right? Justin could hit those receivers fine with the ball he throws, but trying to get it in, you actually are putting the ball in a better position for the defender to get at it or knock it away because it's not arced up over them. He just has a different style, right? And the bottom line to all this is whoever they pick, right, they need to build a team that can support that individual's strengths versus some arbitrary other thing, right? I think Justin Fields can operate and succeed in a system much like the system the Eagles have, right? He is not the predominant factor. He is not the thing that's going to cause you to win or lose. He simply has to get you the couple of passes you need to get when it's time, and the team is so focused on other aspects that they're not at all worried about that, right? That's not the primary, they're not just saying daring you to throw, right? Because we've got everything else covered. The Steelers wanted to be a running team this last year. We talked about this a couple times during the end of the season, that they had an identity that they thought was who they were, and it just wasn't because their offensive line wasn't good enough for them to be that person. Maybe Najee and Jalen Warren weren't good enough for them to be that team, right? They were not a bully rushing team. They were not a top rushing team other than in attempts, right? They attempted it in the top 3, 4, 5, but their output was in the bottom 25. So they were not a top rushing team. They have to figure out who they are, is what I'm getting at. And then they have to decide to make those decisions in the draft, in free agency, and who they're going to retain.
Yeah, and there's some talk about whether Najee comes back or not. I don't think that's their top priority. I think he's a reliable player. He usually doesn't turn the football over, et cetera, et cetera. But I think you hit the nail on the head, too. It's like, can this team succeed with Justin Fields? Well, they did until they didn't. I mean, you saw that the defense, they did their job with Justin Fields. They were giving up about 16 points per game, 18 points per game. He goes 4-2 as the starter. They continue that. They carry it on through until you get to about that Bengals game that was on the road. You have the Bengals and Browns, and then the wheels fall off and you end up losing 5 straight, where the Steelers defense is giving up 38, 14, 27, 34, 29, 19, and 28. It's just wild numbers. It's somewhere in the average of anywhere from 27 to 29 points per game, at least 10 more per game. And the offense just goes, pew, and you're playing against better defenses too, right? So
better defenses, better offenses. They're turning the ball over more.
Yes, that's the biggest thing.
They're not sustaining drives. They're not playing complementary football. Look, is it all that the defense went south? 100% no. Yes. Did they play worse than they had in the early part of the year? Yeah, absolutely. But balls didn't bounce their way, right? They didn't get fumbles. We kept talking about it. Wow, there was 3 balls on the ground. How many did we get? 0, right? We'd go through games where we were getting those breaks, and all of a sudden they're not. The defense is not predicated to be a bullying defense. It's predicated on turnovers, right? That's what it's built on. It's built to be a defense that is opportunistic and takes the game by turning the ball over. And if they don't get those turnovers, they don't hold up. And that was very evident over the last 6 games, right? So that needs to be addressed. That needs to be fixed. How is it fixed? You know, there's probably more than I can analyze in that, but that needs to be addressed, or you got to figure out how you're going to be better and how you're going to cover for it. They don't have the offense that can keep them in games where it's a shootout. They just don't. And the defense, like I said, the defense hangs its hat on being able to turn the ball over. And if they don't turn the ball over, probably not going to win the game.
Yeah, I got a lot to say about defense. Just so you know, I'm not blowing smoke. I'm going to try and get this all on the screen so you can see. I extrapolated Justin Fields and Russell Wilson's stats. This is maybe a little crude here, but this is Russell Wilson's 6 starts versus, Justin Fields' 6 starts versus Russell Wilson's 7 first games and then final 5. Sorry, for some reason I'm like, I can't speak today, right? But you'll see the numbers are very close. A little hard if you're just listening to this. So if you tune in on our video feed over YouTube or on Spotify, you might get a better look at this. But Wilson with more attempts, obviously more yards, over 600 more yards. Completion percentage is pretty close. The yards per attempt, though, in those first 7 games, 8.4 to Fields' 6.9. Russ with 12 touchdowns and 3 interceptions to Fields' 5-1. Yes, I know that Fields ran for a handful, 5 there. You have the 1 interception from Fields to Wilson's 3, right? Sacks, you're almost running away with this. Wilson took 19. He had an extra game played versus 16 taken by Fields. Close enough for me. No rushing touchdowns from Wilson, I think there. You had the 6 fumbles from Fields. Now, I know those aren't all fumbles lost, but it's still a negative play, especially if you're losing yards on it, just the same way a sack is a negative play. You got to eliminate the negative plays. But Russell Wilson had 76 first down plays and a 103.9 rating to 45 first downs and a 93.3 rating to Fields. When you go over the last final 5 games and Wilson has 5 starts, you have fewer attempts, 9 fewer attempts. He has lesser yards by about 150. Could he make that up with another start and maybe 10 more attempts? Oh, George Pickens actually holds on to the football on a few of those. I think he does. Completion percentage, it's still high enough above 60, 63.1 to that 65.8. What I'm really trying to show here is 6.4 yards per play, 6.9. You're talking about a half yard. The touchdowns and interceptions are pretty close there. 6-2 back to Fields is 5-1, 18 sacks to 16. Russ with the 3 fumbles there and the same identical amount of first downs. It really tells me, it paints a portrait that it doesn't matter which of those 2 guys that you would have had in there, because you may have had the same similar performance, and that's what Fields playing at the top of his game at this point. So I don't want to make this all about just quarterback, because there's a few other things to talk about, obviously, but I do want to say I saw some bad takes. They deserve to be shat upon. Somebody said, what do you think about Kirk Cousins? What do you think about Joe Flacco? What I think is if you're anti either of these 2 guys coming back, what on earth makes you think it's going to be any better with Kirk Cousins or Joe Flacco, or I don't even want like Darnold or any of these other guys out there? Yes, really, I've seen Flacco. Joe Flacco is going to be lucky to have a job next year.
Yeah, I can sort of not get behind, but I can sort of at least go, all right, I get the Kirk Cousins talk. Because he at least was still a starter this year.
Successful at some point. And
Joe Flacco?
Same with Aaron Rodgers, dude. You got people trying to float Aaron Rodgers coming here. Aaron Rodgers is done. He's going to go in a dark cave, meditate, and probably retire.
Unless you're going to pull off some amazing chicanery to grab a young, Houston decides to give up on C.J. Stroud, so somehow we get him. Or, who knows, something like that. Forget it. There's nothing out there that is available. There simply isn't anything available that is going to change the dynamic of this team in such a way that they suddenly become Super Bowl level champions. Again, to recount, Sam Darnold is put in a position to win. He's got better receiving core. He's got a better running back core. He's probably got a better offensive line, right? There are reasons that team plays as to the level they have, right? So just don't think that there's a magic pacifier out there that you're gonna insert into the Steelers roster that suddenly turns them into Super Bowl champions. It's not there. They have work to do in a lot more areas before they're there.
Yeah, and that's the same thing I keep saying about the Steelers uniform being Superman's cape, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, revisionist history. People forget, as much as you might hate the Terrell Edmunds pick and see it didn't pan out or whatever, safety was the overwhelming, glaring, gotta have it position to draft for in that draft for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They absolutely had to get a safety. And maybe they reached for Edmonds there. But if they would have took a quarterback in the first round, everyone would have just bitched and complained about how the guy isn't playing. Or it would have been Ben's old, need to get rid of him, play the other guy. And then you don't know. Like Jalen Hurts wasn't Jalen Hurts just to start either. And with Matt Canada as an offensive coordinator, by the time they go to play, it's bad. All the other options are bad. So Rooney saying he'll run it back with Arthur Smith, I have absolutely zero problem with. Was the offense better? It was hard to be worse than what Matt Canada did. I mean, we finally got some games where they scored, 20 points at least. Over half of the year, they at least scored 20 points with 27, 28, 32, 37, 44. They actually scored some points. You had some stinky ones toward the end, but we saw that these teams that are in the Super Bowl right now, getting it done with defense, right? Everybody getting it done with defense. All four of the teams in the conference championships you have to look at is almost kind of like a blueprint. I know people are going to be like, oh, mobile quarterback, this and that. It's like, mobility only gets you so far with some of that. You got to have guys that catch the ball too. It also helps with Buffalo, but I'm okay. Bring Arthur Smith back. There's some speculation about the staff, mostly on the offensive side, reported by Mark Cabali. I think Alfredo Roberts, Eddie Faulkner, and Mike Sullivan. So you got the tight ends coach, running back coach, and an offensive assistant who was the quarterback's coach prior, and then just became whatever consultant, pass game coordinator. I don't know what Sullivan's official title was, but him and Faulkner shared the duties of offensive coordinator co-duties when Canada got canned. So those guys may have expiring contracts. That's not always public information, and that's it when it comes to the entire staff. We didn't even get over the defense yet because Rooney feels that there's not going to be any changes there, and Terrell Austin along with Arthur Smith are down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, along with Mike Tomlin. They've been spotted down there, the whole trio, scouting people. You're not going to bring a guy as a tag along with you if you're going to end up firing him. And I know that's going to probably PO a lot of people. And we talked about how the defense, they laid an egg. The defenses have been bad with Terrell Austin as the defensive coordinator. I've called for him here, but I've also said out the other side of my mouth, it's the same thing where I had cautious optimism about like Russell Wilson. I'm probably a little more optimistic if they brought Russell Wilson back for next year, or even Justin Fields, than I was heading in with either one of them during the summer last year, right? Because I've seen it, and I've seen some positives, and I see, well, if they can maintain that, sure. With Terrell Austin, if he's just the scapegoat, then that means this is all Mike Tomlin's doing. And we've heard Keith Butler talk about this before in the past. And it makes you wonder, but the drop-off from Butler to Austin has been almost mind-blowing, dude. I mean, TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, these guys are disappearing on the football field. You have like legitimate stars. You had 2 all-pro seasons with Minkah in 2019 and 2020. But I feel like he's just been regressed some over the last few years. These sacks, under Terrell Austin, they've had 40, 47, and 40 sacks in the last 3 seasons. You go back to Butler, who was sacked himself from being a defensive coordinator. Everybody had to run him out of town. And he was here, for like 7 seasons? And he had a 5-year span where they had at least 50 sacks in 1 year. In fact, the dip that they had one with 38. All the other seasons were 47 or better. He's doing the best that Austin had. And Austin has 1 more game. They're playing a 17-game season now. And they're just not, the pressure isn't there. There's
no creativity.
They don't. Yeah, did you see what Spagnuolo did in the final play to pressure Josh Allen? He sent a corner blitz after not doing it all day, and it was a ballsy play, but you're playing with the house money. You've got the lead, and you're forcing the guy to make a bad throw, which he did, and you're on your way to the Super Bowl. There's nothing like that. The pressure rate, the Steelers under Butler always got to the quarterback at least 26% of the time, but they had higher blitz rates, providing more pressure as high as 35%. What I'm missing here is something got knocked off of this because Austin's guys just aren't getting home nearly as often. The only thing that they have to hang their hat on, you said it earlier, turnovers, which they weren't getting at the end of the year, is the only thing masking all this. They tied with the Vikings, Brian Flores' defense in Minnesota, with 33 total turnovers this year. That's what they had to hang their hat on.
The reason that I am out on Terrell Austin is the creativity of the schemes they play, right? Nothing is surprising. It's telegraphed. They want to get pressure with 4, but when they can't get pressure with 4, what they do is just not creative. It's not surprising. It seems like it's always covered up. They're not doing things to spring guys open and to have that free runner at the quarterback that disrupts things. I can't even remember, many times at all this season when there was that free runner, right? A guy coming completely clean. They just don't scheme it very well, and that falls on the defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I would think so, unless it's Tomlin. If it's Tomlin, then you got to go, and it's like you run it back one more year. Are you wasting a year? I don't know. Are you, or are you not wasting a year?
The next 2 years are not going to be a waste. Here's why. You can't waste the years when you don't have the team to win right now, right? You can't fix all the problems with this team in this offseason. Yes, you can get better, and I anticipate they can get better, but they can't fix everything. They're not suddenly going to be in the top tier of teams at the end of this season because the most important 3 areas, quarterback, offensive, and defensive lines, they can't 100% fix those in this short span of time. I just don't believe it. I hope I have to eat my words. I hope I have to go, holy crap, they fixed the defensive line, the offensive line, they fixed how they're getting pressure, and they got a quarterback who can run the offense amazingly, and wow, I was wrong. But, I'm never wrong, so.
I know, we try and say that anyway, but I mean, it's TJ Watt had 11.5 sacks this year. That's the fewest he's had since his rookie season, playing a full year. In his rookie year, James Harrison, he kind of faded away, but there were still other guys here that were playing when TJ was rookie. It's disappointing. And you go for being a defensive player of the year that, what do you have? 21.5, 22.5. What's the record? I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still in those talks because he had all the tackles for loss. He had a bunch of forced fumbles. He's not going to win this award, I think, with 11.5 sacks. Trey Hendrickson may have the bragging rights for even over Myles Garrett within just the AFC North, right? So he led the league, and he finished with he had 3 on Wilson in that final game, and ended up leading the entire league. But yeah, there was 22.5 sacks with TJ Watt back in 2021. So I'm looking at this, 24, 23, 22 to 3 years. Usually the Steelers coaches are on a 3-year cycle, but I think Austin was just extended, and he was previously because he was a secondary or defensive backs coach. So I don't know that he's in an expiring contract kind of situation. Him being down at the Senior Bowl would suggest otherwise. It says that the only time, it's weird because Austin, when he was with the Detroit Lions years ago and Jim Caldwell, they took that team, and Terrell Austin was getting head coaching interviews. Now, part of that may be being African-American and teams needing to, per the Rooney rule, interview African-American candidates. I understand that, but he was still getting looks. This was still somebody it wasn't a throwaway candidate. It was like trying to talk with Aaron Glenn.
Right.
Coincidentally, also with the Lions, right? And then he fell from grace rather quickly. The team, they didn't get back to the postseason for a while. They went 17, 46, and 2 over the last 4 years in Detroit. Austin leaves. He goes to Cincinnati, and they gave up more yards than any team in the league at that point. They were the first team in NFL history to allow at least 500 yards to an opponent in 3 straight games. I look at that and say,
ouch.
Yeah, this isn't the same kind of coach like Arthur Smith. You're looking at him and it's like, okay, he failed as a head coach, but look what he did as an offensive coordinator. He made Ryan Tannehill valuable or valid threat. You had Derrick Henry stampeding over everyone after he was kind of relegated. Look how long it took Derrick Henry to like just arrive on the scene, and that was like Arthur Smith. And it's weird because Arthur Smith was there in Tennessee for goodness, a good 8-9 years or so, maybe even 10, with different head coaches and everything. He was a tight ends coach and then moved around. And he was a different assistant, blah, 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 and then became the offensive coordinator. So he's loads of experience. But Terrell Austin, I'm just trying to think to myself, when he's like a positions coach, what input does he have? Tomlin, I believe, has been calling plays. You don't see him hold the play sheet like the Waffle House menu with the Andy Reid lookalikes, but he's got one in his hand. Austin has one in his hand. I would like to know where the real accountability lies, because, for being the, quote, Tomlin ball lickers, I'm starting to point my finger at, even if you get rid of Terrell Austin, now what happens? But there's also no denying that this was different with Butler. It was different with Coach Dad, Dick LeBeau. And the common theme here is the amount of points and yards that were given up. Both of those guys had really shit final seasons and were shown the door at that time. Austin's shit season was just now. They were good, and then they were just terrible. We know they had some injuries. We thought they had some depth, but is he a scapegoat, or can they actually run this back, improve, get back to where they were? I don't know, Brian. I have just as many question marks as anyone else.
I'm going to tell you that reading between the lines of what Art Rooney too said, if 2025-26, if that season plays out the same way as this previous season, we'll be looking for a new head coach. I believe that. I think he will have run out of patience at that point in time. Here's like, again, let me take my let me put my my Mike Tomlin ball licker hat on. I don't know if this is really, So here's the thing. If Mike Tomlin's calling the defenses, he's not good enough at it, okay? And what I think Mike Tomlin is good at is getting people ready to play, getting people excited about what they're going to do, getting people motivated to go out and play. I think he can get the team, and that's all a head coach needs to do. In theory, the head coach shouldn't be calling the plays, right? They're a manager of the team. And if that's the case, then go get a defensive coordinator who can be creative and do some cool things. The problem is, where are they going to get that guy right now, right? You've already lost the opportunity to hire certain defensive coordinators.
Like Eberflus just went to Dallas. Yeah.
You have to make the decision that that's what you're going to do. And it means that, Art Rooney II has to flat out say to Mike, get somebody to run the defense, get somebody to run the offense, and you run the team, right? I think that's a scenario that works. But if I will 100% agree with everybody, if Mike Tomlin right now is running that defense and calling the defenses, then Mike Tomlin is not doing a good enough job. And I do believe at the end of this upcoming season, when it starts and when it finishes, if they don't make the playoffs, or if they go one and done again, that Art Rooney's patience will have run out. That is the way I read
it's got to be. I agree with that. I mean, I've given enough credit where it's due. I think Mike Tomlin gets some things done with some players where other coaches wouldn't, even with the quarterback play being substandard in lots of ways. But when you have the defense play like this, how do you get only 40 sacks with TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton, Patrick Queen added to this roster, Peyton Wilson, supposed to be this gem that you drafted. You got Minka Fitzpatrick. Like, where was he? Deshaun Elliott, Joey Porter, Dante Jackson. You got all of these. You got so many guys. This defense was pretty much loaded. And I know you didn't have all of them in that final streak, but you had them, I think, against the Bengals, and you definitely had these guys against the Ravens, and they got embarrassed pretty badly. So I could see where there's a lot of disappointment. It's hard to go from, we're going to be going this whole time into August and even into September on these shows and trying to have some sort of optimism where there can't be, because you have this terrible taste in your mouth about how that final game of the season ended. It's, you can't defend any of it. And you're watching the Steelers, you wait for Art Rooney to have a special 7-8 minute clip to see, hey, what are they thinking? What kind of impactful changes? As I'm not saying they should be out there like, the Cowboys or the Jaguars hiring a coach before they even have a GM, and then getting rid of a GM in the middle of their coach search. Talk about dysfunctional. It's why they've been perpetual losers for the last 10, 15 years. Dallas Cowboys. You want to talk about mediocrity, playoffs, and everything else? They can't agree on what the guy who pays obscene money to all of his star players can't get out of his own way as an owner / GM. Can't agree on money for a head coach. I mean, I make excuses for McCarthy. I don't think he was the problem there. They're missing defensive players, the injury, you're missing Dak Prescott, whatever. And I'm not saying Dak Prescott walks on water either, but I'm pretty sure they're at least a playoff team if you have your starting court. Not with Cooper Rush, they're not. And then, you look at the other teams, what they're doing, like the Jets and this and that, but you're watching other teams hire coordinators, and the Steelers are just sitting there on their hands. And they're not doing anything. And I don't know if this is enough. I don't think that the Cleveland Browns probably aren't just running it back. They're looking at the second pick. They're either going to move down and acquire more young players, more young cheap players, and maybe they run it back with Watson. Maybe they draft a quarterback at 2 and just say, screw it, we're done with this. Stefanski's taking over the play calling again there because that was supposed to be a challenge. They were supposed to do something that was better for Watson. I guarantee you Zach Taylor is not just sitting on his hands. They already fired their defensive coordinator there and brought in somebody else. So, Robert Salah is another guy I would have looked at. Went back to San Francisco, going back to his roots. I bet you San Francisco's looking at, we had a lot of problems this year, including injuries. And, at least there's something there where you're like, hey, we're running it back. We're reloading. I don't know where the Steelers run this back. Fields or Wilson's going to cost more money this year. It means you're probably not going to take big dips into free agency. On our next show, we're going to talk about who stays and who goes. Not only free agents, but guys that are probably cap casualties. We're going to look deeper into that. We didn't even dig into all the coaching staff for saying there might not be changes other than the guys expiring. How on earth can you think that your offensive line is developed at all? Even with somebody like Dan Moore being a turnstile, and you still had to start him. Broderick Jones, you're turning him into a bust. He's being forced to play on the wrong side of the field. The only optimistic thing you've got there maybe going for you is Troy Fautanu. Your first-round pick may come back healthy next year, hopefully. We still don't know if he's a good player or not because he didn't get on the field, but maybe he'll be out there. You could look at some of the draft class guys that are like Roman Wilson, he could get on the field. Maybe these guys will help supplement an influx of some other players, small changes. They got to win within the AFC North. They went 5-1 with Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph. They didn't go 5-1 this year, and I think the division just continually gets harder. I think the Browns still played them very tight. The Bengals, they split with them. They split with the Ravens, luckily. It's tough, man. It's tough. It's hard for me to justify at least not some changes. Hopefully by the Friday news dump, we get something new out there that says, hey, here it is, finally. And we'll come back and talk to Olians about that after the Pro Bowl games. Brian, any closing thoughts, my friend?
I'm not going to watch the Pro Bowl.
I know you're not going to watch the Pro Bowl.
I'm not going to watch
I
it.
would go to Orlando and still not go to the Pro Bowl.
Here's the most annoying thing to me about this season. I have to root for the Eagles.
Yeah, I know, right?
Win the Super Bowl.
Where are the Chiefs at in Super Bowl count now? We don't want them up there with 6.
I don't want the Eagles to win a Super Bowl. I live too close to them, and they're obnoxious people. I don't like it when they win here because it's hard to be able to talk to people on the street because you just want to smack them upside their head. But that being said, I cannot have Patrick Mahomes win another Super Bowl. I just can't. I can't deal with that, right? we used to have this dumb show, we still have it sometimes, called Mock Draft Insanity, and we said, look,
that'll be
if
back.
all this played, the Steelers would win the Super Bowl every year, which is apparently what Super Bowl Steelers fans want, to win the Super Bowl every year. That's what you're getting right now with Kansas City, and guess what? It hurts the league because nobody wants to watch that crap anymore. It becomes, when it's inevitable, you're just like, screw it, I don't want to see this. So I can't have Patrick Mahomes win, which means I got to root for the Eagles, and I'm annoyed. So that's where I'm at. I'm at right now, and I'm annoyed with the Steelers, even though it's not really their fault that I'm in this position because they weren't going to get there. I'm a little bit annoyed with the Bills.
Yeah, and there's another one. You've actually got people that are talking about Sean McDermott and whether or not Sean McDermott, he's another guy to kick it over. I heard the statistic for the Buffalo Bills and their playoff losses, giving up 38 points, 42 points, all this to the Chiefs. They're in the same boat as Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. The only way that boat's a little different is that the Jets stunk. The Dolphins are usually off and on stink.
That's the biggest difference.
They have the quarterback
that they don't have to worry about anymore.
Yeah, well, we didn't think that they were going to have. They were able to replace both of their safeties. You didn't know what they were going to do with wide receiver, but it didn't seem to matter losing Stephon Diggs, right? They added Cook, dynamic running back, and it's all there, and it's still not enough. The Chiefs, the only reason the Chiefs will be interesting to watch is because the three-peat thing across all sports is just, it's historic. It's something that you never see, should probably never see, and the Chiefs have an opportunity to do it. I think everybody, including us, they won. They continue to win these games, even though they're close, and they continue to do it. And they're still 14-2 this year or something like that, right? 15-2, something like that. And number 1 seed, and that helps too. You know what I mean? It would help if Buffalo could have gotten the number 1 seed. If Buffalo maybe plays that game in Buffalo,
might have made a difference.
Might have made a little bit of difference. I mean, kudos to Chiefs fan. I got a buddy that's a big Chiefs fan. I tell him, it's hey, I remember, a decade ago talking with them. They just got Andy Reid. They got out of the Todd Haley hell with Todd Haley being the head coach. It's oh, well, you could deal with him now as your coordinator, which I would take him back for certain aspects. Certain aspects, maybe not as much, Todd. But I don't know, Margot. But I tell him, it's you guys had to wait. I was oh my goodness, that was all the way back when the Steelers played against Joe Montana, that you didn't have a home playoff game. That's mind blowing. And you just hope as a Steelers fan that you're not heading for 20, 30 years of mediocrity, because there's a whole generation of fans just slightly younger than me, probably Flash's age, that don't know what it's like to have any losing seasons, right?
Our the gentleman who has christened us Tomlin ball lickers. Let me just tell you, it is not a badge of honor to say you lived through the Mark Malone era. I lived through the Mark Malone era.
Did you see his username? His username is Mark Malone.
Yes, Mark. I'm sorry. That, you are wallowing in misery, sir. Just having that as your username proves to me you just want to be miserable. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, well, that'll do it for us, folks. Of course, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'll be back to you next week with some more of our opinions. We'll see if there's any hot news off the press. Maybe we'll join you a little bit later. Also, make sure you check out all of our social media channels, including YouTube, because now we're putting out some other shorter format shows throughout the week too. But our main flagship show here, Steel City Underground Podcast, will be back to you sometime early next week, unless there's some emergency. Maybe Justin Fields makes the Pro Bowl too. Wouldn't that be mind-blowing? Steelers have 2 Pro Bowl quarterbacks. That's just you put that on the line item for how much more you should be paying them, right? Folks, I'll do it for us.
I'm not using that term anymore. It's just, I'm just going to call it the guys who we can get to play bowl.
I know. And in other sports too, they have they don't even do it by conference. I think the NBA has 4 teams. Hockey has they have teams for divisions. And now they do a division and a mini tournament and stuff. And you're just, I don't know. Hockey with them breaking the plates with the goal was always a cool thing.
Maybe just don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
To me, maybe just stop.
That
maybe
TV money
enough.
probably is still something, advertisers or whatever. But that'll do it for us, folks. Till next time, my name's Joe. His name is Brian E. Roach. As always, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.